piles and piles of plastic pieces, and plenty of them. That is what I have always associated with World War II board games. Growing up, my favorite board game was Risk, and my best friend's favorite one was Axis and Allies. So we grew up expecting that if it's a war game, then it's going to have a million billion plastic pieces to push around the board as you roll dozens and dozens of dice. So that mindset is one of the reasons why I was so very skeptical when I came across the World War II board game Quartermaster General, published by Griggling Games, in which players will command only a handful of units. I mean, come on, how am I supposed to dominate the Pacific Theater with just this? Not helping the game's case is the fact that a Quartermaster General is the staff officer in charge of supplies. Are we playing the part of a paper-pushing bureaucrat, bravely fighting back the Nazis by stockpiling paper clips? Oh boy, can't wait. Needless to say, going into my very first game, the odds were stacked against Quartermaster General. Could this minimalist war game of supply management possibly succeed? Or should it just surrender now before things get really ugly? Well, join me in this overview and review of Quartermaster General, and let's find out whether or not this game gets its wings. Quartermaster General is a fast-paced war game that centers around card play, as opposed to chucking dice. In the game, maintaining your supply lines while destroying your enemies is critical for victory. Players will take on the role of either the Axis or Allied countries, scoring as many victory points as possible each round. And after 20 rounds, the coalition with the most victory points wins the game. The primary way victory points are earned is by occupying the starred supply spaces on the map. These supply spaces are crucial for sustaining your battalion's resources. There's 6 factions available to play in the game: Germany, Italy, Japan, the UK, Soviet Union, and the United States. And all 6 are used in every game. So if you play with fewer than 6 players, some people will control multiple factions. But each faction plays on its own separate turn in a very specific order each round. During the game, actions are performed by playing cards. Each faction has its own different deck of cards, and some factions have more in their deck than others. And each is specialized towards a specific agenda, so keep this in mind when playing each one. Each faction plays with a hand of 7 cards that they draw from their deck. But unlike other war games I've played, where it's encouraged to pile as many of your units as possible into each country, in Quartermaster General, each country may contain 1 and only 1 piece per faction. Furthermore, each faction has a limited number of units, and if they're all on the board, then there's no more units available for you. So, managing the strained resources that you have at your disposal is critical, much like a Quartermaster General. Over the course of the game, all units you have on the board must be able to trace a line of their own faction's units back to a supply space that they control. Otherwise, that unit's considered to have been cut off from its supply line and it's removed from the board. So that means that the game requires a little more finesse than just building as many units as possible, wherever possible, and then bombarding your enemy's territory. The cards in your deck dictate the actions that you can take on your turn. Cards are used to build armies, increase the size of your navy, battle at land or sea, trigger an event, prepare a response to an opponent's strike against you, and even perform economic warfare. Each faction's supply of cards is limited though, and cards are how you take actions on your turn. So once your deck is exhausted, you're out of cards and therefore you're out of options. In that scenario, the cardless faction continues playing as much as they can, but their team begins losing a victory point for each time the faction would be required to discard a card, but cannot. The game can end either when one side has armies stationed on 2 of their enemies' home spaces, or when one side reaches 400 points. Otherwise, at the end of the 20th round, the team with the most victory points wins the war and the world. So, as you can see, for someone who grew up on the build and smash strategies of Risk and Axis and Allies, Quartermaster General was quite a different experience. It was almost jarring at first. But did this diminish my enjoyment of the game? Well, just the opposite. I really enjoyed it. And my friend, the one raised on Axis and Allies, immediately wanted to play it again. And it's one of the few games that he has asked for by name when we get together. So, despite being a World War II game that's totally different than the norm, actually, because of that, I really enjoyed Quartermaster General. However, I think it helps to go into the game with the mindset that it may be a different experience than what you're expecting. And while the gameplay is fast-paced, I think I actually prefer this game with just 2 players. The quick turns and synergy between each side's factions lends itself really well to bouncing back and forth between 2 players who are trying to formulate and enact their overall, yet segmented strategies. Also, since the number of cards in each faction's deck varies, it's possible that a faction with a smaller deck, such as Italy, could find themselves out of cards before others. Now I could see how this could cause some frustration when playing Italy with a full complement of players. Each faction also seems to be geared towards a specific goal. Some factions seem to play more of a support role, while others are designed to be making aggressive moves on the board. Understanding these relationships among the factions is crucial to victory. However, not all players may want to be relegated to a role that specializes in support. So that's another aspect of the game that keeps me coming back to it as a 2-player experience, because that allows each player to do a little bit of everything instead of being stuck in one particular role. Quartermaster General was one of the most pleasant board gaming surprises that I have had in recent years, and I would highly recommend checking it out, especially if you periodically get that itch for world domination, but you don't always have the time or space for several hours of moving fistfuls of forces and rolling rounds and rounds of dice. It has earned a permanent spot in my board game collection. And does it get its wings? Absolutely.